But well, let's get started. So those of you who have read through the description of the session might have a feeling that not everything went smoothly in our project when we talk about the challenges, those that were known before and those that came along the way. But we thought that it's really good to also be transparent about what did not go as smoothly or well as we planned for. And maybe this way we can also learn from each other. And also to be transparent about it for us today is much easier than we thought a couple of weeks before, because now towards the end, we really got things going. And therefore, I'm especially looking forward to the later part of this session where Cynthia will present some of the really concrete steps and measures and successes that we made in the project. So the second slide, Adriana, please. So let me just start before we go into more details to introduce the project partners, from whom unfortunately not all can be here today due to a parallel session, but we do our best to step in for them. So the project has been implemented by the Secretariat of Environment of the Municipality of Quito, responsible for the planning and implementation of environmental policies and also the proper management of waste. Then we have Vermonde. It's the first and largest recycling facility for e-waste in Ecuador, also member of Prevent Waste Alliance, contributing with all the knowledge and networks to this pilot project. And then we have Ciclos. It's a German consultancy with experience of EPR projects, or really the EPR experts in the team. And then we have the Wuppertal Institute for Climate, Environment and Energy. It's a German think tank for sustainability research focused on impacts on practical application, implementing projects that contribute to a climate-friendly and resource-efficient world, let's say. But now no longer preface necessary. I will start with the brief overview of what you can expect from this session. So next slide, please. So very brief overview on the context in which we developed the project, then of course the goals, and in a nutshell, the challenges that we encountered, which also led to some changes and delays in the project design and the implementation. And after this introductory part, we would zoom into three. I think in the program it mentioned only two, but sorry, so three elements of the project. So one are the activities related to the EPR system, and then the mobile exhibition for awareness raising and collection for e-waste, and then a brief introduction to the activities in the context of e-waste alternatives, so e-plastics. And then, of course, we will end the session by summarizing the lessons learned and conclusions. So now next slide, please, just to give you, those of you who are not familiar with the country and the city, some background information. So Quito is the capital, and with 2.8 million inhabitants, it's the most populous city of Ecuador. And with an elevation of 2,800 meters, it's also the second highest city in the world. So the Pichincha, what you see here, very beautiful. And it covers an area of 4,000 square meters, of which only 11% is urban, and the rest, so 89%, is rural. And this is then divided again in different parishes. So we have 32 urban parishes and then much bigger rural parishes. So very different contexts and living conditions. So now to understand the motivation of the project, we also want to give you some information, of course, on the local context regarding e-waste. So in Ecuador, statistics, particularly dealing with WEEE, are currently not compiled. So the data situation can be characterized as bad, and we struggled a bit with this, but we received data from the United Nations University, then which later was published in the e-waste monitor. And from this data, we can tell the WEEE generated around 87,000 tons for the whole of Ecuador, which is then 5.1 kilos per inhabitant. And for Quito, our colleagues from Ciclos did some calculation and estimates. This means that approximately 13,000 tons of electronic waste are generated in the city. Then as for collection, so e-waste formally collected is highest in Quito actually compared to other cities, but it's still low, around 1.3 kilos per inhabitant. And then local surveys also revealed that the acceptance in general of separate waste collection and the awareness of the environmental impact of waste is pretty low. So any intervention for separate collection of certain fractions like WEEE needs to incorporate a relevant awareness raising component, so which is one of our main goals. I get to this later. And then last, there are only few companies for e-waste management on a national level. As of, I think the data is from 2021, there were 6 companies registered for e-waste recycling for all Ecuador and 2 operating in Quito. And well, when we started the project, no established EPR system for e-waste existed. So next slide, please. Okay, so given this context just described, the most important issues from our view were initiating and supporting an EPR system, and that the city is really taking a leading role by co-designing a blueprint with the experts from CICLOS and the local partners for an EPR scheme, and engaging the stakeholders, of course. Then we had raising awareness among the citizens as one of the main goals, and really get an understanding of the e-waste challenge and the circular economy principles by the means of the mobile exhibition, which I mentioned, which would go around the different parishes and at the same time collect the small electronic devices. And then assuming that this would lead to an increased collection of e-waste, we also integrated this goal of closing the loop, so alternative use for e-plastics. And yeah, we get to all those work packages or well aspects in more detail in just a second. I would, in the next slide, summarize some challenges that kind of came along the way, which we did not prepare for. So, I mean, we knew a lot of challenges which we wanted to address, like what I just said about the awareness raising, no established EPR system. But let's say on top of this, rather project internal, we had political instability. So we had several periods of demonstration and riots in Ecuador, where, for example, our local project team could not go to office and really streets were blocked. And then also within the municipality, there were a lot of changes. So we had 3 mayors in the time. We had 3 new people heading the Secretariat of Environment and 4 project coordinators. And I think I can keep it short. I think everyone familiar with project management and implementation gets an understanding. So this really led to delays and different political also support for our project within the municipality. And then we also had an ongoing and unclear process on the EPR for WEEE regulation, so and the role of the city in it. As I explained before, when we submitted the proposal or won the project, we planned to initiate and support an EPR scheme, knowing that there was still no national regulation in place. So initially, we wanted the city, Quito, to lead the scheme or lead activities in this direction, set ambitious targets in the context of a circular economy strategy for the city. But due then to staff changes, this circular economy strategy was not continued, and the legal competences were highlighted. So by Ecuadorian law, the cities are not responsible for handling e-waste. So this is a national level competence. But still, we figured, and after discussing different options, that, well, the city could support it, a voluntary alliance, which would then evolve into something more mandatory. And then at some point, just recently, legislation was much faster than we had ever hoped for. A circular economy law was passed, highlighting the importance of EPR again. And then also very recently, even more towards the end of the project, the long expected technical norm for electronics was passed, which set rules and targets for EPR for electronics. And if I say long expected, I think it was a process of 8 years. Joa, you know that better, but it was really, really long process. So somehow this was lucky for us, but it also meant to adapt all the work that has been done. So this explains why we are much later and delayed with our activities, but still I'm super happy now to present what we have achieved and how we went forward. And with this, I would hand over to Cynthia, to you.
Thanks, Lisa. I will talk about EPR for WEEE in Ecuador and Quito. Next slide, please. As Lisa just said, until very recently, there was no EPR regulation for WEEE. So Ecuador had EPR as a general principle established since 2012 for electronics. Unfortunately, it took much longer. The city of Quito started first activities on the topic in 2016. They launched a project called Quito Reciclar. Its goal was implementing e-waste collection points around Quito. This project established 20 collection points all over the city, of which 16 are working now. But the city wanted to do more. In 2021, the Secretariat of Environment was happy to win the project E-nnovating Quito. As you hear, one of the main goals was to identify and engage the relevant stakeholders related to management of e-waste in Quito. We told you that the approach had to be adapted due to the political circumstances. While we were working initially towards supporting a voluntary alliance because no national legislation for EPR for electronics existed. In July 2022, a national technical norm of EPR for WEEE was published by the Ministry of Environment of Ecuador. Next slide, please. We made a stakeholder mapping identifying private companies that disassemble and treat WEEE, public companies that collect and store WEEE, but the most important identified is an association of producers and importers of electrical and electronics equipment called Corporación Ecuatoriana de Responsabilidad Extendida del Productor, CEREP. In September 2021, we developed a webinar about EPR principles. We invited all the stakeholders identified at that moment. Almost 70 people participated in this event. It was amazing to see that people wanted to know about the EPR principle, how they recognized each other, and how they planned to contribute to building an EPR scheme of WEEE for Quito. We invited CEREP to be one of the main speakers. CEREP has already experience with EPR systems. It created 3 producers' responsibility organizations, PRO, for certain waste streams already, such as tires, packaging, and e-waste. Reinicia is the name of the first PRO of WEEE in Ecuador created by CEREP. They are just starting now. They are looking for new producers and importers partners to grow and fulfill the EPR principle collectively. To support them and to promote the EPR principle and the proper WEEE management in Quito, we, the municipality of Quito, planned to make a cooperation agreement between the Secretariat of Environment and CEREP with its PRO Reinicia. Its agreement will focus on developing public awareness campaigns and WEEE collections around the city in the medium and long term. Next slide, please. In this slide, you can see the logo of Reinicia, and one picture shows the collection activities that they are doing with public and private institutions. Also, they are making some workshops to explain all the guidelines of the new technical norm of WEEE. We are happy to partner with them and support their activities. Now, getting to the next main element of our project, the mobile exhibition. As was explained before, one of the main activities of the last slide, please. The last one. Yeah. No, this one. Thanks. As was explained before, one of the main activities of the E-nnovating Quito project is to build and operate a mobile exhibition for awareness raising and collection. As Lisa said, we had hoped for a much smoother process and had planned to have the exhibition running for a couple of months. But let me start with taking a long journey and explain the idea and the approach we took. Lisa mentioned it in the introduction. What we saw as one of the biggest challenges was to raise awareness for the e-waste problem among the citizens. Therefore, we wanted to come up with a comprehensive approach to get to the people, not only via regular campaign on social media, poster, etc., but really get to them. By this, we mean to bring the information to the people with a mobile exhibition, which at the same time can function as a collection vehicle. In the project team, we researched different design options, taking into account the special landscape in Quito. It is hilly, sometimes narrow streets in the historical center, etc. In this slide, you can see some design options we were looking for. Each one of them were made a different meaning of purpose, which make each one unique. But also important to know, none of the examples we found was an exhibition on e-waste, and even less so one for learning and awareness raising plus collection. So there is still a gap to be filled. One of those mobile exhibitions we found is actually in Quito, and you can see in the slide. In order to learn from them, we organized a field trip to Yaku Viajero. It is a mobile exhibition made by Yaku Museum, which is a water museum located in Quito Center. Viajero means traveler. So the museum is traveling throughout the city. It teaches the people the importance of water in our lives, how to take care of water and prevent water pollution. Also, Yaku Viajero was the best inspiration for us. Next slide, please. We know before, but especially after the exchange with Yaku, we know that it is not enough to just write down facts and figures, but that a different approach was necessary. A pedagogical approach, a playful way to get the topic to the people as a educational process. We decided to target kids, and via them, we could also reach their parents and their family. The mobile exhibition is going to visit public places and schools around Quito. Now, as the project ends, we made strong efforts to secure its sustainability via strategic alliance with private actors such as SETEP. Though we cannot share first experience yet, we believe that this can be an example also for other cities, combining the awareness raising activities of a city with the awareness raising and collection activities of a pro. We would be happy to share our experience in another setting in this prevent network in the future. Next slide, please. Now I would like to show you the pedagogical approach. We developed a concept-based 3 stations or topics in the exhibition: the problem, the solution, and call to action. The problem station shows the increase of WEEE generation in the world, how the non-proper WEEE management affects the environment and the public health. The solution station shows how to apply the circular economy model in all the value chains of electrical and electronic equipment. We can contribute to reduce the pollution. The call to action station wants to engage citizens to be part of the solution and spread the message to their families and community. Next slide, please. For all the stations, we developed playful strategies. The first one is called Lab Book, which consists of a showcase with an exhibition of electrical and electronic devices and their evolution over time. It wants to generate nostalgia, interest, and to take visitors reflect to the rapid technological advance in recent years and related to consumption. The second one consists of an exhibition of small disassembled electrical and electronic equipment. It wants to show visitors that electrical and electronic devices contains a variety of materials inside. Some of these components can be recycled and others could be toxic. Third one is a circular economy roulette. It wants to teach visitors the 5 Rs: rethink, reduce, repair, reuse, and recycle. That can be applied throughout the life cycle of electrical and electronic devices. Fourth is a memory match of good environmental practices. It wants to teach about how a citizens can properly manage their WEEE. Now of authorized managers of WEEE and how they treat this kind of waste. Also to show the existing alternatives in Quito for its collection, disposal, and proposed treatment. The last one is a station for audio and video playback. It wants to deliver messages to visitors through interactive videos. Next slide, please. Now I will share with you what has been designed by the company contracted. Please, Adric, can you play the video? Thanks. It might seem little to you, but for our project team, after all the problems and delays, we are very happy that the exhibition will materialize and soon run around the street of Quito. Next slide, please. I focused now on the description of the mobile exhibition because this is the most innovative element, but we developed a WEEE communication strategy called Quito Electro Recicla. This is also a great success of this project. Next slide, please. I am happy to tell you that this is really embedded into a wider narrative, a broader communication campaign of the Secretariat of Environment. This campaign is called Quito Verde. We are also building a website. The material of it has been prepared under this project, started on social media, and create a local radio ad. The mobile exhibition will be referent to in the communication strategy, the website, and the post of tweets. Now Adriana will explain something about e-plastics.
Thank you, Cynthia. So I will talk about one of the work packages that is also very interesting in our project about e-plastics. And as we've talked about it today, currently e-waste is the fastest growing waste stream, and it's reaching around 54 million tons, and it can reach until 74 until 2030. And from that volume, 70% of all the hazardous waste could be disposed in landfills within the next few years. So we are just tackling one of the fractions of that it could be disposed in landfills. And all these plastic components accounts for around 20-25% of the e-waste generated today. And the plastics of the e-waste contain also various types of additives and other components that it's really hard to manage and therefore to recycle. That's one of the main bottlenecks that we have. And each of these components are also classified as hazardous waste, as adding more complexity to the whole value chain, right? Which strongly limits the efficiency of the process and also the potential to recycle. And so the result of that is the current technologies are insufficient to manage all those complexities of such materials and also the large amount of it, because the amount that is being generated today is just plummeting, and it's hard to deal with all the volume in the market. And as the main result is plastics can also, these e-plastics can also be often shipped to countries, usually underdeveloped countries, to be disposed there, and usually not in an environmental friendly way, but also in landfills, or is handled by waste pickers, informal at the most. In 2019, between only 3% of the e-waste was recycled by companies in Ecuador. Around 33 to 37% of the waste contained e-plastics. That's why it's one of the goals of our project to tackle this kind of waste. So some bottlenecks that I would like to highlight here with you today in this session. The first one, as we mentioned and Cynthia was explaining, is about awareness raising. There is a lack of awareness raising among the population on how to dispose this waste. A second one, it would be the insufficient collection and sorting system in Quito specifically. So the waste often fail to reach the recycling facilities, and therefore, as I already mentioned, a significant amount is often exported. And a third one that I would like to bring here is the lack of investment. So existing technologies and innovation process remain disconnected in this value chain, right? So as part of as our project, as I said, there is this innovative initiative to transform e-waste plastic into sustainable construction material. That's what we want to present. There are some pictures here in this slide. So this initiative aims to minimize the negative environmental impacts of construction, uh, turning this material into panels or wood replacement through upcycling process. And this business model is based on the circular economy strategy, like reuse, repair, and also reinvent of these raw materials and the treatment of electronic waste. So if in one hand, the project can produce circular economy construction materials, on the other hand, this problematic waste fraction can be upcycled and use it as wood replacement. That's why it's so innovative. As you can see here in the picture, the application here. So as this is a pioneer solution, it needs to run a series of tests to assure the quality, the safety standards, and so on, in order to understand the feasibility and enable scalability of the solution, right? That's why under one of the work package, some tests were conducted in Germany. We shipped 2 pallets of recycled plastics to be analyzed. The aim was to quantify the technical properties and also in order to explore further potential application for those pellets, right? And the outcomes of these tests will be inputs to Vertmont's facility uh, to improve the process even more, and also how to scale, as I already mentioned. So bringing up some challenges here. The first one I would like to highlight is regulation. There are some internal regulations already, mainly in Europe and USA. However, like the current framework can catch up with the circular economy market, and plastics that has these toxic components, these hazardous components from e-waste can be input material for other plastic products if we apply recycling process. So we need achieve like some standard and transparency, and also to collect more information on labeling based on some technical norms that are already in place, but not specifically for e-waste. So that is a promising solution, but we need to wrap up in this regulatory framework. So we have not only the enforcement, but the technical guidelines to pursue and orient the process, right? A second one would be the value of e-plastic. The value of this plastic is often not worth the labor to attempt to separate the material. So it's one of the lowest and least valuable of material categories nowadays. And one of the most common material streams derived from electrical and electronic equipment, so that it hasn't reached, let's say, a positive market value. So if demand is still too low, there is no significant market yet for these recycled plastics. And one crucial maybe reason for that is the high price of the recycled plastics after all. So we have this high quality recycled plastic that is usually more expensive than new materials, and therefore it has a low demand, right? So two main factors that can explain this price difference. It could be the lack of this standard that, as I just explained it to you, for recycled plastics and for e-plastics. And also it can be explained for the low digitalization or technology for this specific process, right? So these factors contribute to reduce the transparency in the value chain and create barriers for companies that want to recycle this material but don't have irrelevant information or even the technology available, right? So as a couple of recommendations here in this activity, in our process, we bring it up some points here. That would be to develop like a local recycling market, right? We have to increase demand. And one example of that could be through public procurement, but also to support and foster sectoral commitments, for instance, where private companies can commit to use more recycled materials in their process. Another important point would be to make technology available locally, even for testing, because it also a gap today to scale up the technology. A third one would be to accelerate initiatives or solutions to close the loop of e-plastic. So a lot of entrepreneurs could be interesting or have a solution that needs some resources to be scaled. And last but not least, to define, or we can say define, promote, or even advocate for standards, especially for recovery process, labeling, safety requirements, but not forgetting, of course, that it has to be aligned with the local standard for buildings, for instance, which can be different from city to city specifications. So it has to be aligned with local requirements in order to be suitable and also be replicable. So from that, I hand over to Lisa again to talk about some lessons learned in the process.
Thank you, Adriana. So what have we learned? Conclusions. I would zoom out again a bit, so the project as such in the wider perspective. On the EPR side and the role of a city in it, we concluded that if a city wants to lead activities towards the implementation of an EPR scheme, while no national legislation exists, this is not easy, but it does not mean that the city cannot do anything. So first, it needs a very strong political will, for example, an ambitious city circular economy strategy with waste stream specific targets or pilot projects to get activities started. Or also other, I would call it preparatory work, engage the stakeholders, talk about the principles of EPR and kind of lay the foundations for such schemes, start a voluntary alliance and awareness raising program. But we would really also be interested to hear other ideas or other examples which we did not find or so. If there are examples of cities taking this kind of leading role in such process. And then we also concluded that it's super important to embed such pilot project in existing activities of the municipality, because this makes it easier to get people on board and also the ownership to kind of embed it in this wider institutional setting. As I explained, we struggled with the changing of staff, and if we had maybe embedded it more with the ongoing activities right from the start, I mean, we did that now, it would have been easier for the new staff to, you know, get this ownership and continue the process. And then on the awareness raising activities on e-waste, this seems really like a very relevant element to us. And there we see the biggest replication potential of our project, even though we have not really gotten to this pilot phase that we intended within this project. But as Cynthia mentioned, I think we would all be happy to share lessons learned once the exhibition is running in Quito in this community of Prevent, and so also beyond the project lifetime. And we believe that it's a smart way of combining activities of a city, awareness raising activities of a city, and the producer activities. So when integrating such, for example, mobile exhibition and collection vehicle as we designed with the PRO's activities. So getting the city and the PRO together. And then in general on the future of e-waste management in Quito and Ecuador, though we had many delays, and we see that this project has been really an important step to integrate e-waste management in Quito's activities. And one reason is, of course, also the national legislation that was passed, but also beyond that, Quito has taken up activities on e-waste again, cooperating with the first PRO in Ecuador for small electronic devices, and really taking also an active role in the rollout of the national EPR system. So I think that's about it. There is, I believe, one more slide where we just pasted some of the reports that will be released soon on the Prevent website, I believe. Alexander, we have to talk about this later, where we have summarized everything that we just described, the data on e-waste, and then the regulatory framework, and also, which could be interesting because we mentioned that we see this big replication potential, especially with the mobile exhibition and collection vehicle. We will also have manuals, both in English and Spanish, on the 5 playful strategies that were presented by Cynthia to you, and also how to build an exhibition. So really, I think with, you know, the sizes and dimensions and materials. So looking forward to publish those, and then hopefully it's an inspiration for other projects and other cities. And yeah, last, of course, I want to thank also Prevent Waste Alliance for the opportunity to conduct those activities. And now we are happy to discuss. And if you have questions or comments, then this is now the time. Thank you.